The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek as Josephine Miller clutched her letter in trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. The words blurred before her eyes, but she'd read them enough times to know what they said. Her husband Thomas was dead, killed in a mining accident 300 miles away, leaving her alone with 3 children and a mountain of debt in the unforgiving Arizona territory of 1878. Josephine folded the letter and tucked it into her apron pocket, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She couldn't afford to fall apart now. The children would be waiting at home, hungry and tired after a long day. Little Emma was only 4, Samuel 6, and William 8, all too young to understand that their father would never return. How would she tell them? How would she provide for them when the general store owner, Mr. Hollister, had already made it clear he wouldn't extend her credit any further? The walk home felt endless. Their small cabin sat on the outskirts of town, modest but clean, a home Thomas had been so proud of. As she approached, she could hear Emma's cries through the open window. "I want Papa. When is Papa coming home?" Emma wailed as Josephine stepped through the doorway. William was trying his best to comfort his little sister, his young face serious beyond his years. "Papa will be back soon, Emma. You have to be patient." Samuel sat quietly in the corner, his small fingers tracing patterns in the wooden table. Josephine's heart shattered anew. How could she rob them of hope? Yet how could she let them continue to wait for a father who would never return? "Children," she began, her voice breaking. "I need to tell you something." A sharp knock at the door interrupted her. Josephine composed herself and opened it to find Reggie Hayes, a cowboy who worked at the neighboring Silverton ranch. His hat was in his hands, and his dark hair was tousled from the wind. At 32, Reggie was known throughout Silver Creek as a skilled horseman and a fair man if somewhat reserved. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice gentle, "I heard about Thomas. I'm mighty sorry for your loss." Josephine's eyes welled with fresh tears. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I was just about to tell the children." Emma's sobs grew louder and Samuel joined her, sensing something was terribly wrong. "Where's Papa?" William demanded, his young voice cracking. "Why isn't he coming home?" Josephine turned to her children, words failing her. That's when Reggie stepped in, kneeling down to the children's level. "Your pa was a good man," he said softly, "one of the best I knew, and he loved you all something fierce." He paused, looking at each child in turn. "I know I'm not your pa, but I made him a promise once. Told him if anything ever happened to him, I'd make sure you all were taken care of." He glanced up at Josephine, then back to the children. "I'll be the one you can count on. That's a promise." Emma's sobs quieted as she studied this tall stranger with curious eyes, like a new papa. Reggie's cheeks flushed. "No, little one, just a friend. Someone to help your ma and make sure you all have what you need." Josephine was stunned. She and Reggie had exchanged pleasantries in town over the years, and Thomas had spoken highly of him, but they were hardly close acquaintances. "Mr. Hayes, that's very kind, but please, madam," he said, standing to face her. "Thomas saved my life once in a stampede. I owe him, and a debt like that doesn't die with the man." William stepped forward, his young face determined. "We don't need charity." Reggie smiled slightly. "It's not charity, son. It's a promise between men. Your pa would have done the same for my family if roles were reversed." That night, after Reggie left and the children were finally asleep, Josephine sat alone at the kitchen table. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence heavy with Thomas's absence. She pulled out his last letter, dated just 2 weeks ago, full of hope about the mining job that would finally pull them out of debt. Now, all those dreams were buried with him in a distant grave. Josephine couldn't afford to grieve properly. By morning, She needed a plan. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and the pantry was nearly bare. The small amount of money Thomas had sent wasn't enough to last the month. She could sew, perhaps take in laundry, but such work paid poorly and demanded time away from the children. When dawn broke, Josephine had barely slept. She dressed quickly and prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush. As she was setting the table, another knock came at the door. Reggie stood there, his horse tethered nearby. He carried a crate of supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and even a small parcel of candy for the children. "Mr. Hayes, I can't accept." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "I've spoken to Mr. Peterson at the Mercantile. He's agreed to extend credit in my name until you get back on your feet." Josephine swallowed her pride. For her children, she would accept help, but she needed to make something clear. "I intend to repay every cent." Reggie nodded. "I know you will, and there's something else. The Silverton needs help with mending and laundry. Mrs. Silverton asked if you might be interested. The pay is fair, and you can bring the young ones with you." Hope flickered in Josephine's heart. Work and income were what she needed most. "That's very kind. Please thank Mrs. Silverton for me." The children appeared behind her, their eyes widening at the sight of Reggie and the crate of food. "Are you really going to help us?" William asked, suspicion in his young voice. "I am," Reggie confirmed. "Starting today, I'll be stopping by regular to check on you all and lend a hand where needed." Samuel, usually so quiet, stepped forward. "Can you teach me to ride a horse? Papa said he would when he came back." A shadow crossed Reggie's face, but he nodded. "I reckon I could do that, when your ma says it's time." Over the next few weeks, Reggie became a constant presence in their lives. He arrived early on Saturdays to help with repairs around the cabin, showing William how to hammer nails and fix loose boards. He brought a small wooden horse he'd carved for Samuel, and a rag doll for Emma that Mrs. Silverton had made for Josephine. He brought something more valuable: dignity in the face of hardship. He never made her feel like a charity case. Instead, he treated her with a respect that made the townspeople take notice. The whispers about the poor widow Miller gradually changed to admiration for her resilience. Josephine began working at the Silverton Ranch 3 days a week, mending clothes and doing fine needlework that the ranch hands had no skill for. The children came with her, Emma playing in the shade while the boys helped with small chores, earning pennies that they proudly presented to their mother. One evening in late June, as Josephine was preparing to walk home from the ranch, Reggie appeared with his wagon. "Thought you and the little ones might appreciate a ride," he said. "It's getting mighty hot for walking." Emma ran to him immediately, arms raised to be lifted into the wagon. Samuel and William followed more slowly, their initial wariness giving way to cautious acceptance. As they rode, Emma chattered about the butterflies she'd seen, while Samuel pointed out a hawk circling overhead. William sat quietly beside Reggie, watching how he handled the reins. "Could I try?" William asked suddenly. Reggie glanced at Josephine, who nodded her permission. "Come here then," he said, making room on the seat. He placed the reins in William's small hands, keeping his own hands nearby. "Hold them steady like this. Not too tight, not too loose. That's the way." William's face lit up with pride as he guided the horses down the dusty road. For the first time since Thomas's death, Josephine saw her eldest son look truly happy. When they reached the cabin, Reggie helped them down from the wagon. "Mrs. Miller," he said, suddenly formal, "would you and the children care to join me for a picnic this Sunday after church? There's a nice spot by the creek, and the water's cool enough for the little ones to wade." Josephine hesitated. Such an invitation felt like more than neighborly kindness. The children looked up at her hopefully. "That would be lovely, Mr. Hayes. Thank you. Sunday arrived bright and clear. After church service, where Josephine noticed several approving glances from the congregation as Reggie helped her manage the children, they headed to the creek in his wagon. The spot was perfect, a grassy bank shaded by cottonwood trees, with shallow water perfect for the children to splash in. Reggie had brought a feast: fried chicken, biscuits, preserves, and even a small cake. As the children played in the water under Josephine's watchful eye, Reggie set up the picnic. "They seem happier," he observed. "Thanks to you," Josephine said softly. "Your kindness has meant everything." Reggie looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just keeping my word." "To a man who's gone," Josephine said. "Most wouldn't bother." "Thomas was a good friend," Reggie said, his eyes on the distant mountains. "We rode together on a cattle drive to Kansas before he met you. Saved me from a rattler I nearly stepped on in the dark, never asked for anything in return." He paused. "But it's not just about the debt. Your children. They remind me that there's goodness in this world." Josephine studied him. "You've never spoken of your family, Mr. Hayes." A shadow crossed his face. "Don't have one. Orphaned young, raised by whoever would take me in. Worked ranches since I was 12. He smiled slightly. "Your family is the closest thing to home I've known in a long while." His honesty touched something in Josephine. For the first time, she saw beyond the helpful neighbor to the man himself, a man who understood loneliness and loss as well as she did. The picnic marked a turning point. Reggie began joining them for Sunday dinners, bringing small treats for the children and occasionally a wildflower bouquet for Josephine. The children grew more attached to him with each visit. Even William, the most resistant to Reggie's presence, began to look forward to his arrivals. By late July, Silver Creek was gripped by a heat wave that left everyone short-tempered and uncomfortable. The creek where they'd enjoyed their picnic dried to a trickle, and the townspeople worried about their wells running dry. One sweltering afternoon, as Josephine was washing clothes at the Silverton Ranch, she heard shouts from the direction of the bunkhouse. Smoke billowed from one of the outbuildings, flames already licking at the dry wood. "Fire!" someone yelled. "Get water from the well." Ranch hands formed a bucket brigade while others tried to keep the horses calm. Josephine hurried to gather the children, finding Emma and Samuel quickly, but William was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your brother?" she asked, panic rising in her throat. Samuel pointed toward the burning building. "He went to look at the new foal." Josephine's heart stopped. The foal had been born just days ago in the small stable attached to the now burning storage shed. "William!" she screamed, running toward the flames. Strong arms caught her before she could get too close. "Stay back," Reggie ordered, his face grim. "I'll find him." Without hesitation, Reggie wrapped a wet bandana around his face and ran into the burning building. Josephine clutched Emma and Samuel to her, praying harder than she ever had. Minutes stretched like hours. The flames grew higher, and several men tried to hold Josephine back when she made another attempt to go after her son. Then, through the smoke, a figure emerged: Reggie, carrying William in his arms, a small foal stumbling along behind them. William was coughing but conscious. Reggie set him down gently before collapsing to his knees, his shirt singed and his face streaked with soot. "William," Josephine cried, gathering her son in her arms. "What were you thinking?" "I couldn't let the foal die," William coughed. "Papa always said we protect those weaker than us." Josephine looked at Reggie, who was being tended to by one of the ranch hands. Their eyes met over the chaos, and something passed between them: understanding, gratitude, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. That evening, after Dr. Coleman had checked both William and Reggie and declared them suffering from nothing worse than smoke inhalation and minor burns, Josephine sat beside Reggie on her porch. "You could have died," she said softly. "Wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't tried," he replied, his voice raspy from the smoke. "William's a brave boy, foolish but brave." Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "He's so much like his father, Thomas would be proud of him," she hesitated, "and grateful to you, as am I." Reggie looked at her then, really looked at her, his blue eyes intense in his smoke-smudged face. "Josephine," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I need you to know something. What I'm doing helping you and the children, it stopped being about my debt to Thomas a long time ago." Josephine's heart quickened. "What is it about then?" He took her hand gently. "It's about you, all of you, you've become." He struggled for words. "Important to me." The touch of his hand sent warmth through Josephine that had nothing to do with the summer heat. She'd been so focused on survival, on keeping her children fed and sheltered, that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge how much Reggie's presence had come to mean to her. Before she could respond, the door opened and William appeared, his face still bearing smudges of soot. "Mama, is Mr. Hayes staying for supper?" The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. Josephine squeezed Reggie's hand before releasing it. "If he'd like to." Reggie smiled at William. "I'd be honored, son." August brought violent thunderstorms that turned the parched earth to mud and the dry creek beds to raging torrents. During one such storm, the roof of the Millers' cabin began to leak in several places. Josephine placed buckets to catch the water, but by morning it was clear the damage was extensive. Reggie arrived with tools and supplies before Josephine had even sent word. "Roof won't fix itself," he said simply, when she expressed surprise at his appearance. For 3 days he worked on the roof, recruiting 2 of the Silverton hands to help. The children watched in fascination as the men replaced rotted wood and laid new shingles. Emma appointed herself helper, solemnly carrying nails in her small apron. On the final day of repairs, as Reggie was packing up his tools, a sleek black carriage stopped in front of the cabin. A well-dressed man stepped out, consulting a piece of paper before approaching the house. "Mrs. Josephine Miller?" he inquired. "Yes." Josephine wiped her hands on her apron, aware of her disheveled appearance. "My name is Harold Whitmore, attorney at law. I represent the Silver Summit Mining Company." He glanced at Reggie, who had moved protectively to Josephine's side. "I have some matters to discuss with you, privately." Josephine felt a chill despite the summer heat. "Mr. Hayes is a family friend. Anything you have to say can be said in front of him." Mr. Whitmore sighed but proceeded. "Very well. I'm here regarding your late husband's death. The company extends its deepest condolences." 5 months after the fact," Reggie muttered. The attorney ignored him. "Mrs. Miller, your husband was involved in an accident that the company initially classified as worker negligence. However, recent testimonies from other miners have indicated that proper safety measures were not in place. The company wishes to avoid unpleasantness." Josephine stared at him. "What are you saying?" "The Silver Summit Mining Company is prepared to offer you compensation in the amount of $500 in exchange for your signature on this document releasing them from any further liability." He produced a paper from his coat. $500 was more money than Josephine had ever seen at once. It could pay off their debts, provide for the children, maybe even allow her to open the small dressmaking shop she'd dreamed of. "May I see the document?" Reggie asked, his voice neutral. The attorney hesitated but handed it over. Reggie read it carefully, his expression darkening. "This says Thomas was partially at fault, that he knew the risks." "Standard language," Mr. Whitmore dismissed. "It's a lie," Reggie said flatly, "and Mrs. Miller won't be signing anything today. She'll need time to consider the offer and consult with her own attorney." The man's professional demeanor slipped. "The offer is good for today only. The company is being more than generous." Josephine found her voice. "My husband is dead, Mr. Whitmore. My children have lost their father. If your company is at fault, as you've just admitted, then proper compensation should be discussed with legal representation, as Mr. Hayes suggested." "I strongly advise, good day, Mr. Whitmore," Josephine said firmly. "I'll be in touch after I've consulted an attorney." After the man left, visibly annoyed, Josephine sank onto the porch steps. "What if I've just turned down our only chance at security?" Reggie sat beside her. "You haven't. If they're offering $500 to make this go away quickly, they're worried about something bigger. Judge Patterson in town is fair-minded. His son Robert practices law. I think you should talk to him." Josephine nodded slowly. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." "You'd have done fine," Reggie said with conviction. "You're stronger than you know, Josephine Miller." His faith in her brought tears to her eyes. For months, she'd been merely surviving, moving from one crisis to the next. But now, with Reggie beside her, she began to believe she might actually build a future for herself and her children. Robert Patterson took Josephine's case immediately. He was outraged by the mining company's attempt to pressure a widow into signing away her rights. Within 2 weeks, he had gathered testimonies from miners who had worked alongside Thomas, all confirming that the company had ignored repeated warnings about unsafe conditions. In late September, a settlement was reached, $2,000 for Josephine and her children, a sum that left her momentarily speechless when Robert informed her. "It's what Thomas deserved," Reggie said when she told him the news. They were sitting on her porch, watching the children play in the yard as the evening cooled around them. "He'd be proud of how you stood your ground." "I couldn't have done it without you," Josephine said softly. "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad I was here to see it." He hesitated, then added, "The foreman at Silverton is leaving. Mr. Silverton offered me his position." Josephine felt a pang of anxiety. "That's wonderful news. You deserve it. It means I'll be staying in Silver Creek permanently, my own cabin on the ranch property." He looked at her directly. "I've been thinking about the future, Josephine." Her heart beat faster. "Have you? The children need stability, a home. You deserve someone who'll stand beside you, not just in times of trouble." He took a deep breath. "I'm not Thomas, I know that. But I care for you and the children more than I thought possible." Emma's laughter floated across the yard as she chased a butterfly, Samuel and William not far behind. Josephine watched them, these children who had suffered so much loss, yet still found joy. "Reggie," she said carefully, "are you asking to court me?" His weathered face broke into a smile. "I reckon I am, though I'm making a poor job of it." Josephine thought of Thomas, his laugh, his dreams, the life they'd planned together. She would always love him. But she was still here, still living with 3 children who needed more than memories. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like that very much." The courtship was proper but swift. Reggie called on Josephine every Sunday after church, sometimes taking the family for rides in his wagon, other times simply sitting on the porch while the children played. He brought small gifts, a hair ribbon for Josephine, a wooden top for Samuel, a book of adventure stories for William, and a tiny china doll for Emma that became her most prized possession. By October, as the aspens turned golden on the mountainsides, Reggie had become such a fixture in their lives that even William, the most protective of his father's memory, began calling him Reggie instead of Mr. Hayes. On a crisp Sunday afternoon, Reggie took Josephine for a walk while Mrs. Silverton watched the children. They strolled through a meadow dotted with late-blooming wildflowers, the mountains rising majestically in the distance. "I've been saving," Reggie said as they walked. "Between my new wages and what I've put aside over the years, I've made an offer on the Anderson place." Josephine looked at him in surprise. The Anderson property was a small but thriving ranch just outside of town, with a sturdy house and good grazing land. "That's wonderful, Reggie. You'll make a fine rancher on your own." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'm not planning to live there alone." He took her hands in his. "Josephine Miller, I love you. I love your children as if they were my own. I want to build a life with all of you if you'll have me." Tears filled Josephine's eyes. 6 months ago, she'd thought her life was over when Thomas died. Now, standing before this good man who had quietly rebuilt her world, she felt hope blooming as bright as the wildflowers around them. "The children," she began. Reggie smiled. "I asked their permission first, even William, especially William." Fresh tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks. "What did they say?" "Emma asked if she could call me Papa. Samuel wanted to know if they'd have to move, and William." Reggie's voice softened. "William said his father would want someone to take care of you all, and if it had to be someone, he was glad it was me." Josephine's heart swelled with love for her children, for their resilience and generosity of spirit, and for this man who had entered their lives when they needed him most. "Then my answer is yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I will marry you, Reginald Hayes." He drew her into his arms then, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of his reverence for her and the life they would build together. They were married on Thanksgiving Day in the Silver Creek Church, with the entire town in attendance. Josephine wore a new dress of deep blue, with the children at her side as she spoke her vows. Emma scattered flower petals with solemn concentration. Samuel carried the rings on a small pillow. And William stood tall beside Reggie, a young man accepting a new chapter in his family's story. The Anderson Ranch, now the Hayes Ranch, became their home. The house was larger than the cabin, with room for the children to grow and for the family they might add to in the future. Reggie taught William and Samuel about ranching, while Emma helped Josephine turn the house into a home, hanging curtains and arranging furniture with the serious attention of a child playing house. Their first Christmas as a family was filled with simple joys. Reggie carved wooden animals for each child. Josephine sewed him a new shirt from fine cotton. The children presented them with drawings and small treasures they'd collected. They sang carols around the fire, and when Reggie caught Josephine beneath the mistletoe, the children giggled with delight. Winter settled over the land, bringing snow that transformed the ranch into a wonderland. The children built snowmen and had snowball fights while Reggie ensured the livestock was protected from the cold. In the evenings, they gathered by the fire, reading stories or simply talking about their day. One night after the children were asleep, Josephine found Reggie standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "How lucky I am," he said, turning to face her. 6 months ago, I was just a lonely cowboy with nothing but my horse and saddle to my name. Now I have everything a man could want." Josephine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We're the lucky ones. You came into our lives when we had lost all hope." Reggie lifted her chin gently. "I made a promise to those children that I'd be the one they could count on. I intend to keep that promise every day for the rest of my life." "And what about your promise to me?" Josephine asked with a smile. "To love, honor, and cherish." He kissed her softly. "That's the easiest promise I've ever made." As winter gave way to spring, the ranch came alive with new growth. Calves were born, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the children spent more time outdoors than in. William, now 9, showed a natural talent for horsemanship that made Reggie prouder than if the boy had been his own flesh and blood. In early April, as they were preparing to plant a vegetable garden, Josephine shared news that brought tears of joy to Reggie's eyes. She was expecting a child. The children received the news with varying reactions. Emma was delighted at the prospect of a baby to help care for. Samuel was curious about how babies grew. William was quiet at first, then asked if the new baby would change how Reggie felt about them. "Not one bit," Reggie assured him, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "My heart's big enough for all of you. Nothing will ever change that." As Josephine's pregnancy progressed, she watched with wonder as Reggie prepared for the new arrival with the same dedication he showed to everything. He built a cradle, smooth and sturdy, carving the family's initials into the headboard. He added a room to the house, working late into the evening after his ranch chores were done. The children helped too. William assisted Reggie with the building. Samuel collected soft feathers for a baby pillow. Emma sorted through her few toys, selecting which ones she might share with her new sibling. In late November, just over a year after their wedding, Josephine gave birth to a healthy boy. With her children and husband gathered around her bed, she cradled the infant in her arms. "What shall we name him?" she asked softly. Emma leaned in to touch the baby's tiny hand. "He looks like Reggie." Samuel nodded solemnly. "He has Papa's nose." William, who had been standing slightly apart, moved closer. "I think we should name him Thomas," he said quietly. "So he knows about the father who came before." Josephine looked at Reggie, whose eyes shone with emotion. "Thomas Reginald Hayes," she suggested, "to honor both the men who have blessed this family." Reggie nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He gathered his family close, Josephine with baby Thomas in her arms, Emma leaning against his side, Samuel perched on the edge of the bed, and William standing tall beside him. In that moment, surrounded by the family he'd helped heal and now called his own, Reggie understood the true meaning of the promise he'd made that day at Josephine's cabin. It wasn't just about providing food or fixing a roof or offering protection. It was about love, the kind that grows from compassion, builds through adversity, and sustains through all of life's challenges. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the land in a blanket of white. Inside, the Hayes family embraced their new beginning, bound together by love, resilience, and the promise kept by a cowboy who had once said, "I'll be the one they can count on." The years passed, bringing changes both great and small to the Hayes family. The ranch prospered under Reggie's careful management, growing from a modest homestead to one of the most respected cattle operations in the territory. Josephine's small dressmaking business, started with some of the mining settlement money, gained a reputation for quality that brought customers from as far as Phoenix. William, at 18, was nearly as tall as Reggie and had inherited his stepfather's way with horses. His quiet competence earned him the respect of the ranch hands, who increasingly looked to him for guidance when Reggie was occupied elsewhere. Though he still carried memories of his birth father, William had grown to love and admire the man who had stepped into that role with such grace and commitment. Samuel, now 16, showed an aptitude for figures and business that complemented his brother's practical skills. He kept the ranch books, spotting opportunities for expansion and efficiency that impressed even the banker in town. "That boy has a head for business," Mr. Hargrove often commented. "He'll go far in this world." Emma, at 14, had blossomed into a thoughtful young woman with her mother's gentle spirit and determination. She helped care for her younger siblings, not just Thomas, now 6, but also 4-year-old Rose and 2-year-old James, the children born to Josephine and Reggie in the years following Thomas's birth. Life wasn't without its challenges. Drought struck the territory in 1888, forcing difficult decisions about which cattle to sell and which to try to sustain through the parched months. A fever swept through Silver Creek in the winter of 1890, claiming several lives and leaving Emma bedridden for weeks, her recovery uncertain until Josephine's tireless nursing finally broke the fever. Through it all, Reggie remained the family's steady anchor. When the drought threatened their livelihood, he worked alongside William to dig deeper wells and explore new grazing areas. When Emma fell ill, he rode 40 miles through a blizzard to fetch a doctor from the nearest large town. One summer evening in 1891, as the family gathered on the porch after supper, 13-year-old Thomas asked a question that had been on his mind. "Papa," he said to Reggie, "how did you and Mama meet?" Josephine and Reggie exchanged glances, memories of those difficult early days passing between them. "Well," Reggie began, settling back in his chair, "I knew your mama and your older brothers and sister before you were born. Your brothers and sister had a different father, first a good man named Thomas, who you're named after." Young Thomas nodded. This wasn't news to him. The family had always been open about their history. "When Thomas died," Reggie continued, "your mama was left alone with 3 children and not much else. I'd known your first father from our riding days, and I'd made him a promise once that if anything happened to him, I'd look out for his family. So you helped them because of a promise?" Rose asked, her small face serious. "At first," Reggie admitted, "but then something happened that I hadn't counted on." "What?" James demanded from his perch on Josephine's lap. Reggie's eyes met Josephine's across the porch. "I fell in love. With your mama and with William, Samuel, and Emma too." William, leaning against the porch railing, spoke up. "I remember when you first came to our cabin. Emma was crying for Papa, and Samuel and I were trying to be brave." His voice, now deep like Reggie's, softened with the memory. "You said you'd be the one we could count on." "And you were," Samuel added from his seat on the steps. "Every time." Emma nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You taught me that families can heal even after terrible loss, that love can come again, different but just as real." Josephine reached across to take Reggie's hand. "Your father gave us more than help when we needed it most. He gave us hope when we thought all was lost." Reggie squeezed her hand, his heart full. "You all gave me something too, a purpose greater than myself, a family to love and protect." Young Thomas considered this. "So you weren't always our papa?" "Not by blood," Reggie acknowledged. "But in every way that matters, I became your papa the day I made that promise to care for you all." Thomas nodded, satisfied. To him and his younger siblings, Reggie was simply Papa, the constant, loving presence who had always been there, teaching them to ride, to rope, to face life's challenges with courage and integrity. As the children drifted off to play in the twilight, Reggie and Josephine remained on the porch, their hands still entwined. "Did you ever imagine this life when you rode up to my cabin that day?" Josephine asked softly. Reggie shook his head. "Never. I just knew I had to help. The rest." He gestured toward the children playing in the yard, the prosperous ranch stretching around them, the home they'd built together. "This was beyond anything I could have dreamed." "For me too," Josephine admitted. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I couldn't see past the next meal, the next rent payment. You gave me room to breathe, to hope again. And you gave me a family," Reggie said simply. "A home. Love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. From the yard came the sounds of their children's laughter, all 6 of them playing some game of tag that crossed age boundaries and blood ties. united in the simple joy of being together. In the distance, a rider approached. As he drew closer, they recognized Robert Patterson, now the town's most respected attorney and a frequent visitor to the Hayes ranch. "Evening, folks," he called as he dismounted. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Never," Josephine assured him, rising to offer him a seat. "What brings you out our way?" Robert accepted the chair with thanks. "Good news, actually. The territorial legislature has finally passed that bill establishing the new school fund. Silver Creek will be getting a proper schoolhouse by next spring." "That is good news," Reggie agreed. "The children have outgrown that one-room building years ago." "There's more," Robert continued. "The school board is looking for trustees, respected citizens, to oversee the building and hiring of teachers." He looked at Josephine. "They've asked specifically for you, Mrs. Hayes. Your business sense and commitment to education have been noted." Josephine blushed at the praise. "I'm honored, but surely there are others more qualified." "None that I can think of," Robert said firmly. "A woman's perspective is needed, especially one who understands the value of education for all children, not just the wealthy." Reggie nodded his agreement. "You should do it, Joe. You've always said our children deserve the best education possible." Josephine considered the offer. When Thomas died, she'd barely been able to imagine the next week, let alone taking on civic responsibilities. Now, 13 years later, she was being asked to help shape the future of education in their community. "I'll do it," she decided, "for our children and all the others in Silver Creek." Later that night, after the younger children were asleep and the older ones had retired to their rooms, Josephine and Reggie stood outside under a sky brilliant with stars. "I'm proud of you," Reggie said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "School trustee. You've come a long way from that day I first saw you standing in your doorway, trying to be strong for your children." Josephine leaned back against his solid warmth. "We've all come a long way. William talking about college in Denver. Samuel already investing his savings in cattle. Emma teaching Rose to read before she even starts school. We've been blessed," Reggie agreed. "More than I ever deserved." Josephine turned in his arms to face him. "Don't say that. You deserve every happiness. You've earned it through your kindness, your hard work, your unwavering love." He touched her face gently, marveling at how, after all these years, she still took his breath away. "Do you ever regret it, marrying a simple cowboy who had nothing to offer but his hands and his heart?" "Never," she said without hesitation. "You had everything to offer, Reginald Hayes. You offered strength when we were weak, hope when we had none, and love when we needed it most." She kissed him softly. "You kept your promise. You've been the one we could all count on every day since." Under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the home and family they'd built together, Reggie held his wife close and thanked God for the day he'd made that promise, the simple words that had changed not just Josephine's life, but his own. "I'll always be the one you can count on," he whispered against her hair. "For as long as I live," and he was. Through every trial and triumph that the years brought, through children growing up and grandchildren being born, through Silver Creek's transformation from frontier town to thriving community, Reggie Hayes remained true to the promise he'd made to a grieving widow and her children on that fateful day in 1878. He was the rock upon which they built their lives, the shelter in every storm, the steady hand guiding their way forward. And Josephine, the young widow who had once struggled to imagine a future without her first husband, found in Reggie a love that didn't replace what she had lost, but built something new and equally precious, a love born of compassion, tested by hardship, and strengthened by the shared journey of raising a family and building a life together. Their story became legend in Silver Creek, passed down through generations the tale of a cowboy who kept his promise and found a family, and a widow who found the courage to love again. It was a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes of the West and the most difficult circumstances of life, love could take root and flourish, bringing healing where there had been only heartbreak and hope where there had been only despair.